thinking- So essentially what I'm going to talk about in this video is that I am going everything local first. That has always been my hallmark. That has always been my goal. I know like cloud and everything is good for whoever wants to pay bills to AWS and other cloud providers. But for me, as an individual, I've always valued edge compute. And essentially, edge compute is what empowers everyone as an individual. And that's what I have believed for the most part. And I have state of the art in terms of individual compute. Yay! And that is what I have valued for the most part, and that is what I'm currently working towards. So with LLMs, we are trying to get them to the edge, and I already have LLMs running decoupled from any remote server, and I can freely expand my thought, refine the existing LLM, and I that is my what I'm going towards. And one missing piece that I want to reinvent is that I want to reinvent everything locally. That's it. I want to rethink everything with no pointer pointing out to the outside world. I know that sounds a little bit strange given that our current state of the art in terms of our world is pretty much interconnected. We live by the web, but let's stop on that for a bit. And what I'm thinking now is actually to create a local browser. A local browser, well, we do that. We do have something called the File Explorer, but something different that I want is having a fully native local ecosystem of your own. So, for example, a replica of Twitter, but with automated LLM agents that provide you with a daily feed of what your life is all about, where your life is all about, with full isolation. So the whole goal is isolation. I know it doesn't sound the promise of interconnectivity of the web. I love the web. I know I'm going to go for the web. But for now, for the moment, I prefer that isolation moment simply because I need that ultimate unique perspective and growth that I can push as an individual. And eventually, anything local can be copied and scaled later. That's it. But the whole thing is you want your true individual unique perspective, and I highly value that. So this is sort of you could say a philosophical perspective on what information is all about. And I truly believe in the fact that as individuals, we are able to uniquely provide value. But what we always lacked was some sort of encyclopedia or huge pool of information that we can always ask from. But the thing is, we never had. It has never been such a good moment with all these good and yet hallucinating models. We can have them locally on the edge and essentially use these models to forge your own path. So you never have to Google again. You never have to go to ChatGPT remotely on the web again. You can deploy all these models locally on your machine and have them fine tuned if you need as well. And you just need a heavy compute. And also the goal is to compact and as much as possible, like get that compaction without losing performance on the edge, because that's one constraint that we have here. The edge doesn't have as much compute. And for example, like the machine that I'm recording it on is just a MacBook Pro with all the data in here. But the thing is, as the basic thing in any edge compute is that you run out of storage, you run out of some basic resources. But I have a state of the art. Like it appears state of the art at least. I know I might be hyped, but I do own an Apple Studio Apple Studio, Mac Studio actually, Mac Ultra Studio. Oh my gosh! And then I have this M4 chip, the latest in the series of a MacBook Pro. I have them both. They're part of a venture called AT Capital, which is essentially the venture fund or the company that owns these assets. And the whole point is to completely isolate compute and also any information that is generated and really push and advocate for privacy, even though I am already compromised in some sense. To my understanding, a fully native, local first company should have everything locally computed. That's it. But having to own your own vertical stack and also somewhat, horizontal stack that you want to scale out when you want to increase more services and whatnot, is that it can be difficult unless you own your data center and whatnot. But I truly believe in the individual compute. It's just me for now, or actually, it's just me who owns these assets. But what I want to see is that I want to understand if it's truly possible to go local first with these technologies in a way that you can actually use them to, for example, do your to day activities. One of the things that you often can think of is that, for example, you have basic dependencies or basic needs on certain services. Like, for example, if you run out of items for your day to day, if you run out of, for example, some groceries, you have to go and get some groceries. And your reliance on existing either delivery services or whatnot is networked. And you cannot eliminate that unless you create your own swarm or army of agents that can do things for you on behalf and also has that full isolation. I mean, you need that full installation of having to reveal who you are. And also, one of the uh, best things that I need, or one of the biggest things that I need, is that when you want to create this kind of isolation, you increase inconvenience, right? Not everything gets done at any given time. So you want that schedule ahead, look ahead, prediction for everything based on your local context so that you can operate at scale. So doing this has never been impossible until now because you have these models that you can fully run on the edge. But I'm overselling these models. Like having these models locally doesn't actually mean that you can run them at a concurrent scale. One of the limitations that I saw with these models is that you cannot actually scale some of these requests. In fact, the amount of requests, like the amount of response that you get, is bounded by the amount of tokens these models spit out. So it's kind of strange. There's a whole lot of constraints that I have to work with, and I really was intrigued by the idea of a fully local first browser. I know the browser was invented for the web, and it was truly invented for network based interactions. But what I want to know, or what I want to see, is that can I make a browser that browses local resources, that browses using LLM as agents locally, fully locally, no network. Everything is air gapped. That means if it wants to pass this boundary, essentially, which is the capital, AT capital, and if it wants to pass that boundary, it should have that certain authorization, and it should have some high level of insulation. So I want to create this environment, and this local browser should come with basic things such as a feed. So a feed is what you use on your day to day. So essentially, much like the famous Twitter feed or X feed, you want a local feed of everything that is happening on your local machine so that you can have that full report of or full joy of having to interact. And this feed is going to be populated with all of the agents that are currently working on something. So they give out updates, they could post memes as well, or fun things that they jokes they can come up with. So that's one area. I think it's one pocket in the local vicinity that I think is doable, or that is possible, where that is possible for us to create. And the other one is, well, I'm not going to do JavaScript. I'm like, in the back of my mind, I'm like, wait, how am I going to build this? But we're not going to worry about the implementation for now. But I'm just laying out the land map here. And why I'm doing this is that I, like, at a deeper core, I truly believe in having to own everything you develop. So every development, every little action that you make generates information. You are an information generator. And as an information generator, you need to retain as much of that information you generated in your local node without having to give out or give up any traces, footprints, or essentially leaving out any trace. So if it's necessary, we might even go to the kernel or even hardware level. But for now, we're just going to maintain things, or we're just going to make sure we're going to do away with things at the software level. Apple hopefully is going to cooperate with, like, our hardware is going to cooperate with at least isolating certain tracking metrics. I don't like anything that has gone out. I want a fully isolated system, and I'm going to try that out. But what I've seen in the past is that this creates a huge level of inconvenience. Essentially, it makes the machine unusable, right? You are essentially, throttling everything through a proxy, and that proxy will just hog every little thing, and it would be really quite hard to deal with whatever it is that you're trying to work on. And what's even the point if it's just a single node or a single human agent using this? You might say, well, and also I have limited capacity, but what I want is a complete understanding. Like, the system should have complete feedback and whatnot. But I know I'm asking a lot, but this is just going to be part of it. Of course, there's video processing as well, and there's textual processing, and what else? We have everything processing on here. I have the Mac Studio has 512 gigabytes of RAM, which is good enough to at least run, ideally, 512 different processes concurrently on each memory. That's what I'm thinking now. So at least the maximum that we can go is 512 gigabytes. But I know that's not how it works with these Apple devices, because they come with a unified architecture. They usually kind of sneak in a little bit of overlapping performances, so you might not get that uniform distributed performance. That's what I know, at least. But other than that, I would say, alignment is hard, right? So you have one other thing that I'm trying to deal with is that you have your local LLM model, which has been a way for which is your source of truth, let's say, initially. But then you notice certain things. So you take that piece of information that that the LLM has responded with, and you test it out. Essentially, you apply it in real time or in the actual world. And then when you get that feedback from the real world saying, "Oh wait, this doesn't work. This doesn't align with what the truth of what was claimed to be." It's that simple, right? And you feed that back, and then essentially, if your model is static, that means you're just consuming the same model, which doesn't really have a knowledge or a difference between what the real world feedback is. You need additional data synthesizing that feeds back this data back into, or this feedback into the model as a sort of fine-tuning moment. So I also want to create an AI synthesizer, which is essentially synthesizing data models, or actually not just data models, additional data that is fed back as sort of an input. And essentially, we want that self-regulating, not just self-regulating, but self-organizing, and also self-educating or self-learning system that continuously grows based on local development or local finds. So that's what we're aiming for, and I'm pretty excited about it because I think it is doable. Like, it's not like it's far off. And also the exciting part is that it's done on a very cheap hardware, well, relatively cheaper hardware, cutting edge, state of the art, and in terms of like individual compute or personal compute. And also we have two of them So we are going to see how we can pair these two together to essentially get that ultimate local setup. But other than that, I would say that's pretty much what I'm currently working on. There's also another part that I'm currently working on, which is an AI native dependency manager, which is essentially trying to manage dependencies. Uh, Everything local, anyways, the theme is everything local. We want everything localized. The downside of that is that you quickly grow on the verticals. That means you would lose the verticals a lot, which is memory and whatnot. And I'm gonna post this on, like, the conflict that I'm having in my head right now is that, okay, I have recorded this video. Who am I gonna reach out to, right? The usual process, like the instinctual thing that has been, is that, okay, I have an idea or whatever it is, I want to get it out there, I want to see what people are doing with it, but I want to iterate on it first. So the usual thing I would do is iterate on this, build a basic MVP or a proof of concept and get it out there and see what my friends are going to say. So I'll reach out to my friends and whatnot, but this would break the installation gap, or essentially I would break that installation and essentially give out my information or somehow that piece of intellect that I generated here. So each and every word, even if it's trash, that you generated here is a piece of intellect, right? You are essentially giving that out, and you should even be careful because you have other machines. So I have my personal computer here. I have my, oh, actually, that's the Capital phone, and I have my Meta Ray bands here, which is concerning because the Meta Ray bands are kind of actively listening to what I'm currently saying, and we need to take a swift measure in terms of creating an insulated room. And this is going to be so essentially we're trying to create a digitally spotless room, which doesn't make sense, I know, in the real world, but because it's just creating additional inconvenience. But you might think that's just about inconvenience, but it's also about the compute digital human rights. Like, it's your basic human need or human right that is being taken away from you if you don't have the right knowledge, tools, and technology in place to protect you from these vulnerabilities. So essentially, these are vulnerabilities. Anyone can use these these objects as a way to create an attack vector and use that attack vector to push you or essentially influence you in some way. So if you want true unique freedom, you want information freedom, which is like your ability to understand whatever it is or whatever information that you've got, and whatever is coming out of your own intellect, and have that protected as much as you can. So that's the goal here. And of course, you don't want to isolate that because it might feel a little too cold initially, but eventually it's going to get warmed up, right? Your vertical stack, once it grows. So for example, that browser, local first browser, what even is the point if it's not browsing the web, you might say, right? But the point is, you want to create your own network. That's it. That has always been the goal. Everybody has been trying to do that. Everybody has been trying to essentially create their own networks or create their own set of graphs that they can relate to. How they did that or how they were enabled in the past or in the, now it's going to be the old days, but in the old days of doing it is that you go to social media, you actively market whatever it is that you're trying to build and reach out to humans and do that as much as you can, because humans were the ultimate generators of knowledge, and they still are. I'm not denying that. But the thing is, in this day and age, well, token generation, which is like reasoning through LLMs, is still there, but it has somewhat plateaued, and it could be the next frontier as, individual empowerment. Essentially, you're empowered as an individual to be able to create ultimately whatever you want, whatever you can, on the edge, on the fly, without leaving as much trace or as much noise, or without making as much noise. And I value that. Like, for most people, hopping on a platform could be difficult. Like it might be difficult initially because they might have their own unique perspectives. They might not feel they might be heard or whatnot. But it's like if you have your own pocket of knowledge. That means if you have your own pocket of knowledge, and you can take different chunks of it and develop through it organically. That means you can communicate with that. So essentially, you'll have an alternate brain, not like essentially your own brain, but you have this alternate sidekick that you can consult with at any given point. Again, with that air gap. So I feel like the number one emphasis that I want to put on is security, but security slows you down, right? It's generally like saying on every request, I have to get this authorized. I have to get this authenticated. We want to remove security. That's it. I know this sounds crazy, but the reason that is good is because everything is localized. Like everything is localized from request to knowledge to whatever it is, knowledge bases to anything that you want is right there for you. But I know this sounds like a utopia scenario where you ultimately know everything. You essentially have the monolith that possesses as much information as you want, or actually everything, and you have this monolith on your hands that you can ask a stone of truth that you can go to, and essentially that stone of truth will give you every answer that you need, and it's right there for you whenever you don't or whenever you fall short in the knowledge base, right? But the funny part is, if it was about knowledge, you would have been rich, right? If you're so there's this funny meme of that. If you're so smart, why aren't you so rich, right? It's that common meme. Like it's okay. If you're so smart, why aren't you so rich? Like it's that simple. So being smart, that means creating the smart devices, has definitely empowered people, but it's also the sharing aspect that that has created a lot of value throughout the years, right? You can share these pieces of information or pieces of artifacts. Actually, an elevated version of information would be an artifact. That means you have generated this information, and this information can be shared as a form of artifact. When everybody comments, that's an artifact, right? They're essentially populating the network with more data, and that grows the database and whatnot, right? That's how you essentially see the growth in the network. So my thinking is that we don't want to eliminate that, but we still want that internal, fully polyglot nation that can still communicate, but still have that internal modularity. I mean, it maintains its own culture and everything. So it is definitely possible to create that. And having that is good, in my own opinion, because everybody has their own perception. They were created, and so we're going deeper into the philosophical side of things and why I truly believe this is important. And this also might bring why isolation. Why do you want to isolate? Maybe you're processing your life, your compute process, and the thing is, it brings true peace. I think it gives you the ability to not not control, but yeah, I mean to control. Like you can control every piece of information, and this might sound a little narcissistic, but it is definitely doable and possible to create this isolated environments to share information, but they're still large enough. That means they are very much packed with life that you can create or you can proceed with having to get things done. So the whole point is that there's life, which is the reality outside, and it always provides you with a certain signal or feedback from the whole outside environment. That means you're provided with a whole lot of signal that you need to process and whatnot. But your ability to process as a human being is limited. That means you're only aware of a certain spectrum band or a certain gap or a certain group of information. And on the other hand, you also have these machines that are like sub compute or that came from us that allow you to process things. But all these years, we were pushed to the cloud. We were pushed to the uh, well, we were pushed to not just the cloud, but push everything that is intensive to the server or to far end centralized servers, and then we only deliver it as needed, which made sense or reasonable. But then, when we saw that these were single point of failures, we created different ways to make a whole lot of things distributed, decentralized, and yet we still are not there yet, right? We still are not there yet. And I truly believe in individual compute and personal compute a lot, that I want to see if I can do a 75-day challenge to run my life. So, for example, the thing about that is that there's that personal habit, right? Using your computer as a sidekick is quite a strange experience because you have to rely on your computer for basic services. So, for example, if you want to order food, then you have to rely on certain services to do that. You cannot just go and do that. So there's that, or either there should be some manual involvement. That means you go out, drive your car, or walk. If you're like, no, I'm not gonna leave a footprint or anything outside, but drive your car and then go out and grab food and essentially pay that. So the payment service is also there, as you can see. So there's the payment service, there's the actual food preparer service, or the one that prepares your food, and there's the wait time, and then whatnot. So everything that you appear today is convenient because these processes have been isolated into their own modular services that are nice enough that you don't feel the inconvenience. But then if you're like, no, I'm going to own these processes, and you have to buy all the clunky items or the cooking utensils to cook your food and make your food and whatnot. So this creates that object cluttering. That means in your own space, in your room or home, it creates that additional compute cluttering. That means you have to create more objects, or essentially pull in more objects. And there's something called a supply chain, right? Which is there are multiple services coming next to each other subsequently, passing down that value or creating this value chain that delivers certain service to you and essentially caters that service to you. And this is quite a hard thing to break apart, right? These should be there. So I'm not coming up with a revolutionized supply chain, at least yet. But what I'm thinking is that information has brought us the ability to think independently. That has been good. Everybody has their own opinion, but we also operate on a global scale, which just is incredible. But I have found it really daunting in the sense that I often end up on the average, which is fine for the most part. Like for 99% of what you do, being average has become or has been inculcated into you, even if you don't know what it is. So it's always answering like what people expect to just for the sake of growth. But that 1% time, you need that ultimate leveraging factor for those 1% moments. And for those moments, you need that ultimate unique perspective. And am I even going after that 1%? Well, it's hard. It's not that easy, and I prefer hard problems than easier problems. And I feel like I've established the core reason for why I am actually doing this. And can I do this? I don't know. It might be difficult. One thing I've seen around my life is that in the States, it's easy to really restructure your routine, how you work. And so my current routine is that I work on a hybrid setting, so which can be really difficult not to overpopulate context or somehow I get exposed to the outside world, which is okay. But then I have that alternating schedule which doesn't work well with what I'm currently talking about. So managing conflicts is very difficult. So I need either a clone that can attend for me in meetings, that just stands here and does nothing. And there's also other dependencies which are like just craving my attention. So I need that full operating system. Like I need that operating system level that operates on my needs, right? So I've eventually reached at the bottom of things, right? There it is. There's the computer. And there is like no need for me to even create a browser. It's to create an operating system. Okay, so, but is it about performance? Like it appears like it is because I'm just going after, chasing after that 1% gain, and just that 1% better gain would set me off. I'm believing in that. I don't know why. I don't know why I'm essentially trying to believe in that. Obviously, that's super delusional, but the thing is, I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure this would yield a useful result. And this is quite like the stupidest idea I've ever come up with because it doesn't make sense, right? Full isolation, full full isolation of compute, air gapped. That means you don't need to um, reference anything outside the system. So that means you have your computer, and that computer is your only source of truth. And when it spits out something wrong in a lot in which is misaligned with whatever reality posits, then realign, fine tune, and make sure I find my way back to truth. So, but at the individual level. But I wonder how that would take because I I have no idea. I just saw some LoRa receptors, whatever they are called, Q LoRa and LoRa receptors, and that's how you do fine tuning with these LLMs. I have GPT 120, GPT OSS 120B, and a few other large language models locally. So I can run them at a very good pace, at a very good rate. But the generation rate is definitely hampered. It is slow. But um, for the early stages of development, I don't mind it being slow, as long as I can generate it on the fly without having to give up my data. And for the most part, question and response or querying information is often slow if it's air gapped, and it's reasonable because you don't have infinite compute and whatnot. So I often have to come up with very clever ways of having to meet constraints, of course, because these constraints are definitely making the environment a little bit too hard to work with. And this is just an isolated environment. In an isolated environment, no other information comes from the outside unless authorized by the ultimate sole user or existing agents within the platform. So there will definitely be multiple and multiple agents running. But what I see is that not having thousands of agents that will yield results in a local operating system. What I see is that it's partly the understand. So I want the system to be aware of itself. So I want full self-awareness from a local system. And self-awareness comes from having to define oneself, define the environment, be reactive to signals. That means anything that happens. That's also one other defining character. And I really want to have this. So I know it kind of got extended because that's what I'm thinking and that's what I'm trying to develop. I will add more to this, but this is just an interesting development. But yeah,